My name is Shauna Kutch. We are having a discussion on what I call shadow and how we can work with shadow and integrate shadow. And rather than be afraid of it or push it away in our medicine space, we're just sharing knowledge with each other. When we went to Colombia, they have been so generous in teaching my son Brigham and teaching Maria Jose and teaching me about their medicine and their culture. And it was a beautiful space that they created. I've never heard music more beautiful because they sing from the heart and share everything from the heart. And there's so much love there that it feels so generous and uplifting.
But he says thank you.
Yes, I tell everybody I've shared medicine space with a lot of people, and I've never heard anything as beautiful as what you guys create in that space. And it brings our soul up to our highest level, and that the same beautiful group of people were brewing their own medicine, and it was the deepest and most loving medicine I've ever experienced in all the medicine I've taken. So I just want to, first of all, give my gratitude and respect and honor to the work that you do there in Colombia, and we're excited to come back there and experience that again. And we are looking forward to going back and bringing more people to experience their amazing creation of love and service and exposing us to grandmother in such a beautiful, enlightening space. Raul asked me to share with him in my experience in working with shadow. So I'll give a little bit of background on myself and how I've come to this. I've been experiencing grandmother since 2015 in Colombia. And in about 2018, I was told I was going to go into do shadow work, go into a cocoon and learn all about my darkness. I have learned a lot since then about constellations, which is all about shadow work. It's called Family Constellation Therapy, and it's all about creating a safe space to put your energy field in so that your shadow can come up and be recognized and be heard and be integrated. So I've been doing this for 7 years to learn more about shadow. And in my ceremonies, I was clearing a lot of dark entities, but I've never been afraid of it. I've always understood not to deny or be afraid or resist the dark shadow, but to bring it out and love it and embrace it. And then after a long time of doing that, when Brigham got his medicine space, then I started seeing who I was working with in clearing this shadow. And at this time, in this place that I would always go, and I never knew who I was talking to or working with when I would get this shadow into my body and clear it. When I would clear this shadow, I didn't know who it was with until that time. So I had one of my participants that was doing constellations. She told me, she said, I speak star language, and she wanted to do ceremony. So she was doing it with us. And in ceremony, she started speaking the star language. And so in my ceremony, I was going to the place I always go to. And before I knew it, I was speaking this star language to whoever I meet with to clear the shadow. So I asked this 80-year-old lady that had the medicine space and knew that that space was for Brigham. I asked her, because I asked this girl, what language were we speaking? And she said Arcturian. And so I asked this woman, do you know anything about Arcturian? And I haven't been speaking that language since because I don't know it. I just did in ceremony because it was letting me know that that's who I'm working with in doing my shadow work. And in my family constellation therapy, I have been taught how to do it differently than I was trained to do it with my Bert Hallinger teacher. I was taught how to take it to another level, which my teacher approved of me doing, which, by the way, the reason she approved is because I wrote a book called Big Souls Make Big Promises that she read. And so she understood the ancestral work that I'm doing with family therapy constellations. And I did get that book translated in Spanish, so I will send it to you guys if you want to read it. Anyway, so at that point, when I realized who'd been teaching me, because I was taught to work with vortex, I create a vortex so that the negative energy can go be a place for the negative energy to leave the earth, and how to create a crystal grid. And so when she told me, she said, I'm responsible to clear the darkness from the earth, and they do it through vortex. Now, this all happened in one day. So in my ceremony, I realized I was speaking the Arcturian language. And then the next morning I talked to her and find out that's who's been working with me on both learning how to clear it and understanding that I have a contract with them to clear darkness from the earth. So after that, then my constellations became a lot more powerful because I realized the star people are working with me all the time. Then recently had an Akashic reading about being in Atlantis and putting the codes in the crystalline grids of the earth, and that now we are bringing those codes back through the constellations. And I was also told I have a male and a female Arcturian by my side all the time to support me in doing this shadow work. So then in that reading, I was told that we're bringing those codes and those tools back to help big souls with their evolution so that we can help raise the consciousness of the planet. Every time I've done many ceremonies in clearing this darkness in my ceremonies and doing it in my constellation. So it's been, shadow is very familiar to me, and I understand that shadow is necessary for us to evolve, to understand our shadow and embrace our shadow and integrate our shadow. So a lot of people are always seeking the light or enlightenment, but they're forgetting that Creator created light and He also created dark. And without dark, we wouldn't have the polarization that the third dimension brought us so that we could learn from our shadow. But in the evolution of religion, then we've been taught, and I was taught myself, that there's the good and the bad. And the bad is evil and it's the devil, and we have to push away the bad. And that came about because we were learning from that polarization. We were learning to find balance and learn from the shadow, from the opposition in our life. But now we understand in the higher consciousness that Creator created dark and he created light. Some choose to be the expression of dark and some choose to be expression of light. But we came down here to experience both. But the most important part of this is to understand that we ourselves are that balance. We have light and we have dark equal to the light, because if we're not in balance, then we don't have that polarization. So we don't come in here with all light. We come in here with an equal balance. And because the earth is shifting now into the Christ consciousness, the fourth dimension, which is the heart chakra, our Christ consciousness. And it's also shifting into new energy of Aquarius, 12,000 year cycle. In doing this, it's important that we close the gap of separation within ourselves. And many people, if shadow is hiding and you don't know you have shadow, then shadow runs your life and you don't know that's shadow keeping you stuck in areas of your life. And I had the worst shadow because I had an very abusive, challenging childhood, and I shut it out. And when you shut out any negativity in your life, then any secrets or hidden is where shadow can gain power. So I've had a dissociated personality, which was a shadow that I was unconscious that it would speak for me, and I was very unconscious. So I've done a lot of work to bring that to my consciousness and integrate it. And the one thing that I've learned in doing the shadow work in my family constellation therapy is that people think you can get another person's shadow in you, but that's not it. That's not the case, because You can't attract anything you don't have in yourself. So if I'm doing big shadow work and somebody gets scared of the shadow and it starts making them feel scared and feel bad, it's because their shadow is making them scared, because fear makes the shadow in control. It doesn't mean they're getting that shadow from my shadow. And the more shadow hides from you, the more the shadow can make you think that's their shadow, not my shadow. But if somebody's doing their shadow work and they can trigger somebody else's shadow, the scientists that studied my work said that we are soul bonding. So your shadow can be triggered by another person's shadow to get you to wake up to your shadow and integrate it with love. Because if you have fear around shadow, it's your fear and your shadow causing fear. So what I was called to go to Colombia for was to integrate big shadow with Mother Earth, big energy shadow up there with Mother Earth. So integrate shadow. To integrate is to be able to express and experience it and then take the judgment off of it. And then integrating it by taking the judgment off of it, because we think shadow's bad, or we think behaviors or anger's bad, or all these things are bad. But the judgment on them is what gives it power, because it gives it resistance. So we get to take our judgment off of it if we want to integrate it. After we express it and we experience it in our body, we allow our body to experience it, and we take the judgment off of it, then we can transcend it. And the scientists that studied my work, and this is on the internet in many places, it's called the double slit experiment. What that does is show you that if you observe negative energy with a powerful intention of love, then you can alter or transmute that energy. In ceremony, if you have this strong intention of love and there's a lot of shadow that comes up either within yourself or others, and you're allowing your own shadow to be integrated, you've been working with shadow instead of pushing it away, and you don't have judgment that shadow's bad, then you can integrate that shadow within yourself and help others integrate it in ceremony. So to give an example, once when I did constellations, and I bring my people over to Brigham so that once I clear their shadow out of their energy field, because we do it through them observing, then I bring them over to Brigham's and they do ceremony after transmuting the shadow. Now grandmother helps them to transmute it in their body. So this woman had come from Germany. She had 4 generations of executors that we integrated for the Nazis. So she was on her mat next to me, and she was saying, Shauna, these ghouls, these ancestors won't leave me alone. And I knew it was her judgment on. She thought that it was bad, so she had judgment on dark energy. And instead of embracing them and showing them love, because they taught her, they were her teachers, and they taught her all these things, she thought they were bad. But they were a part of her because they were part of her ancestors. So I called Brigham over, and he just put out his arms and he just laid all across her body and loved them. So he had a strong intention of love, and he just loved all those, what she called ghouls and evil, and it just all went away. So it was a very beautiful lesson for her not to be in judgment just because they made choices that were not good, but everybody has creator in them. And so shadow gets to be acknowledged as our teacher, because without shadow, we wouldn't learn what we've learned, having this adversity in our life. So transcendence is bringing to you express, experience, and integrate. Transcendence is taking the wisdom that you gain from shadow and taking it with you and stepping up another step. So if shadow is a low vibration, and when we transmute it, it brings our energy and our vibration up much higher. Many of us don't understand that until we delve into our shadow, that's where our divine is, because we're loving those dark places in us. We're bringing light to them and love. And that helps us not have judgment on other people, because we see everybody has shadow behavior. And the way we get triggered by their shadow is because we have that ourselves. So all we have to do is observe it. And the way we do that is either do a family constellation, do ceremony, or tell your body to turn that emotion or that anger or that judgment way up, and then observe it by saying, that's an interesting point of view that I have that point of view, because the I is the shadow. So it takes your emotion from 10 down to 2. Then instead of hiding your shadow and being ashamed of it, so shadow drives your bus, then you are bringing shadow down and you are driving your bus. Because the scientists made it very clear, it's not somebody else's negative energy coming into us. We're communicating back and forth because only 10% of our communication is verbal. The rest is through soul wound bonding. So they're bringing science and spirituality together. Well, the reason I call it shadow is so that people can bring it in closer to them and bring shadow into their light and have it their friend instead of resisting it. So I call it shadow just so that we can see ourselves. When we stand out in the sun, we have shadow and it's nothing bad. So that's why I use that word shadow, but it's negative energy, it's entities, everybody has a word for it, but that's what I call it, so that we can see that it's harmless unless we resist it. Even though we know it's just shadow or energy, a lot of people become afraid of it because it can be very powerful if we're afraid. So thank you for allowing me to share.
The results for myself in doing constellation work as a representative and then for myself as a seeker has been life-changing. I have been able to, even as a representative, just being part of that process for other people has allowed me to process some of my own negative energy. Probably the biggest, most significant change for me has been I have had a relationship with my twin sister that's been estranged for several years. And over the last few weeks, we've been trying to come back together. And when I did my constellation, I felt like so much of that, the issues and the hurt and the negativity from the last 10 years were just kind of wiped away. And I saw her after my constellation, and she had no idea that I had done this, but it felt like a different relationship. It just felt so much different than it had in the few weeks prior when we had gotten together. And I attribute that to being able to process that negative energy that I had carried around for so long. This has been a life-changing experience for me. I went into this the first time and I was a skeptic, but coming out of the first constellation that I was part of as a representative, I could see that magic that was happening in that circle that is so hard to explain, but it was there and it happened. And I would absolutely recommend anybody to do this work with Shauna.